Good afternoon. My name is Harry Kohlmann. I'm the founder and CEO of Park Street. And I'm recording this video for Park Street University. Today is March 27th, 2020. And today, President Trump just signed the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And over the last 2 days since the Senate passed the legislation on Wednesday, we have fielded tons of inquiries by suppliers, a lot of concerned entrepreneurs, etc., asking how this legislation would impact them, how they could take advantage of different elements of the act. And having had all of these discussions, they triggered a lot of discussions with other service partners of ours. We talked with banks, we talked with accountants, we talked with lawyers. I thought it would make sense to outline a little bit of how the act is structured and what the relevant items are. The law is 880 pages thick, and there's tons of different items in there that are relevant for every American. But this short video here is really intended to focus on the main act that is basically intended to help small businesses. So if you think about what happened over the last couple of weeks, it's almost unimaginable to think about that 4 weeks ago. Many of us thought that the impact of this virus on the US economy would be minimal. Now, after we've been through the last couple of weeks, a lot of us wonder of what will come next. If you look just at the jobless claims that were filed this week and compare them to any other point in history, it's not even close. It has been the biggest shock in the shortest period of time to the US economy. So obviously, one of the reasons behind it is that governments in a lot of places, in a lot of states, have taken the lessons from the Chinese and from several European countries to try to slow down the spread of the virus by shutting the economy down, shutting down restaurants, bars, all type of on-premise activities in order to promote social distancing and making it basically mandatory. The stock market crashed over 30%, over a 3-week period. Then the jobless claims rose or exploded this week. And overall, there's very limited visibility with regards to when things will go back to normal. I think the president came out this week and had expressed his hopes that things will be up and running again by Easter. It's not pretty clear what the picture is. There might be parts of the country that will open up by that time. Some portions of the country might take a little longer. But there's no clear picture, no clear timeline, given that it's an unprecedented situation. So with this economic picture and no real conviction with regards to how long this will last, Congress acted. And I think on Wednesday, the Senate, 96-0 vote, and today the House passed this legislation. It's called the CARES Act. It's short for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security. Was signed into law today, 880 pages, with the purpose of helping Americans through the economic hardship caused by that crisis. So a lot of the aspects of this, there's tons of stuff written about, every American is going to get a check that depends on the income, etc. I'm not going to talk at all about that because the mainstream media, etc., will cover this extensively. The focus on this presentation is really about the package that will help small businesses. So if you take the overall act into perspective and compare it to other economic relief or stimulus packages from the past, so you would think the 9/11 crisis or the financial crisis, this act is significantly bigger than all three of these acts combined. So when you look into the Airline Act of after 9/11, the TOP Act, and the ARRA Act, 2009 after the financial crisis, or at the top of the economic crisis. So you take them all combined, and it's not as big as this CARES Act. The CARES Act is over $2 trillion big, pretty big. So the act is structured into four titles, basically. One is Keeping American Workers Paid and Employed Act, and that's basically where I want to focus my thoughts on. But there's three other acts. So one is the Assistance for American Workers, Families, and Businesses, which is the checks that different Americans will get. There's also elements in there for alcoholic beverage producers, for example, relief for FET payments if distilleries opt to produce hand sanitizers. And then Title III is supporting America's healthcare system in the fight against the virus. This is obviously going in to try to help the healthcare system to be prepared and to get relief. And then the economic stabilization and assistance to severely distressed sectors of the United States economy. This is basically for airlines, anything travel related, really, that sectors that are severely impacted. Airlines probably would not be able to come out of this without these pieces in that act. So I want to just focus on Title I, basically, Keep American Workers Paid and Employed Act, and in that in particular, about the Paycheck Protection Program. So the Paycheck Protection Program, what is it? So it's basically a flexible loan program to help small businesses survive and incentivize them to maintain employment levels. So the thought process that Congress had behind this legislation is that instead of businesses that are severely impacted by this crisis going in and laying people off, and the government paying the unemployment benefits and having the people not at work and causing a lot of interruption and a lot of problems once the crisis is passed to get people retrained and get them back up and running. The idea here is that let's give companies incentive to maintain employment levels, to basically keep the jobs safe and get through this crisis without interruption. With that, people having paychecks, people are able to pay their expenses at home, similar to how it was a few weeks ago. So the housing market might not get as much affected, and life will go on as normal as possible for the majority of workers. So that's the idea here. So who qualifies under this program? So it's basically available for all kinds of small businesses, as well as like non-for-profits, veterans organizations. The limitation is 500 employees or less. And there are some SBA guidelines. It's the Small Business Association or the Small Business Act. And it's administered, the whole program is administered through the SBA. That does not mean that it's an SBA only program, because there's some major differences to original SBA programs, because it goes much faster and it has a lot of other elements in there that make it very different. So nobody should go on the SBA website right now and think about let me apply there, because the law actually tried to streamline the process dramatically in order to make it easier. The law also covers sole proprietors. So if somebody is a sole proprietor and can claim a kind of salary or kind of self-payment, they qualify the same way as other small businesses. And so an eligible recipient, basically who applies, has to make a good faith certification. So that's what the law says. Basically, you got to claim, or the applicant has to claim, that the uncertainty of the current economic condition basically make it necessary to request the loan to support the ongoing operations of the eligible recipient. So on top of it, the applicant has to acknowledge that the funds will be used to retain workers and maintain payroll, or make mortgage payments, lease payments, and utility payments. So this is basically what the applicant has to certify. But it's similar to tax filings, where it's a voluntary disclosure. Somebody has to go in and make that certification. They can later get audited, and so therefore nobody should take this easily or make false statements. Everybody should be honest and basically make it with a good faith certification. Now, what does it entail? So the SBA is the guarantor, and they provide 100% guarantee for the loan amount. And the loan amount is basically calculated based on a historical payroll. There are some conditions in there for seasonal businesses where it's a little different, but for normal businesses, it's basically the average of the last 12 months payroll times 2.5. That is the maximum amount for a business. So if the payroll is $10,000, the monthly average payroll $10,000, or the annual payroll is $120,000, then the loan would be $25,000. Now, if the payroll is $100,000, the average payroll, meaning the annual payroll would be $1.2 million, then the loan amount would be $250,000. And then basically the Act allows companies to hire back workers because there's certain stipulations in there, because it looks at the historical data and it provides some loan forgiveness later if the employment level is at a similar level like it was historically, or like not significantly lower. Or if it's lower, it's basically percentage-wise reduced with regards to what the government might want to provide as forgiveness. But I'm going to talk about that in a little while. So the loan is basically for 10 years, and it has an interest of 4%. It's non-recourse, and it does not require a personal guarantee. So it's pretty good terms. And the overall appropriation in the bill for this program is $349 billion. That's a pretty big number. Now, the real interesting part of this, it's that it's a loan that comes with some forgiveness possibilities. So first, let's talk about who administers the loan. So in the past, SBA loans go through the SBA. So the SBA website crashed this week, and the SBA is not in a position to process hundred thousands of loans over the next couple of days. In the typical SBA fashion, it would have been like a couple of months until the paperwork is reviewed, and a couple of months until the funds might flow. Time is of the essence here. So what Congress said was basically, let's have financial institutions be the agent. And they basically go through with a loan and underwrite the loan for the recipient. So basically the objective is to get qualifying companies to help quickly. Now, I got the question over the last couple of days with regards to could we set up Park Street a relationship with the bank and help our clients to facilitate this program. But that might not be such a great idea because given the KYC requirements for banks, it is intended to really work with existing banks of companies. So if you have a particular bank relationship you're banking with originally or already, then it's intended or it's recommended to work with that particular financial institution and get that loan processed. So from the banks we spoke with, their expectation is that this is basically like a 48-hour turnaround. So where this goes through simple forms and again with the intention to make the money or make the funds available pretty quick. Now, if somebody doesn't have a bank or not a real banking relationship, then any bank could do it. But again, there are some requirements with regards to getting the KYC regulations in place or following the KYC regulations, making sure you make yourself known, provide some background, etc. To work with a particular bank. Now, what are limitations of the loan? So the maximum amount is $10 million. So if the payroll is, like $2 million a month average, then the loan could go up to $5 million. But if the average monthly payroll would be 10 million, the loan would still be capped at $10 million. This is obviously like you get to much larger payrolls. The other thing that is a limitation is that Congress limited the eligible salary per person at $100,000. So if there's an employee that makes more than $100,000, the eligible number that goes into the base that calculates the loan amount is $100,000. And that, by the way, the $100,000 threshold also applies when it comes to the loan forgiveness. So loan forgiveness is the, I would say, at least in my history, I've never heard of anything like this before, but it's the thing that makes this program one that shows that the intent of Congress was to maintain employment in the United States. And so therefore, what this law does, basically, it tells, or it says that the borrowers basically are eligible to ask for loan forgiveness without any, because there's no loan, there's no recourse or no like personal guarantee, etc. So its intention is you can ask for loan forgiveness equal to the sum spent on covered expenses during an 8-week period after the loan is originated. So the idea would be that there's an 8-week period that the country needs in order to get through this crisis, and for the 8 weeks we want to maintain employment levels. So therefore, if you spend the loan amount over the next 8 weeks on covered expenses, the loan will be forgiven. So covered expenses basically include payroll. So the definition of payroll here is broadly, basically it includes wages, salaries, retirement contributions, healthcare benefits, covered leave, other expenses, interest on pre-existing mortgages and loans, rent and utilities. So all of that goes into covered expenses. So let's assume the loan amount is $250,000 and the payroll over the next 8 weeks is $200,000. Then there's another $50,000 available to have spent on utilities, etc. And let's assume there's not the total covered expenses are not $250,000. It's just like $225,000, for example. Then the $25,000 would stay on as a loan, for 10 years at a 4% interest rate. But the $225,000 would be forgiven if, this is a prerequisite. So the lender or the borrower has to submit to the lender basically payroll documents to showcase this was really spent for payroll, and documentation of any of the other covered expenses like documentation for mortgage interest, rent, or payroll expenses, and a certification that the information is true, and any other documentation that the SBA might come in right now. I mean, Congress wanted to act obviously quickly, but any other documentation that the SBA might ask for. When we spoke today with a couple of different players, they all said that the SBA is working overtime right now. They're trying to come up with what that is over the weekend and have basically the SOPs ready for all the financial institutions by Monday so that the loans can be given out as early as Tuesday or Wednesday next week. So that will be March 31st or April 1st. So once the borrower asks for loan forgiveness, there's basically 60 days where the lender will basically determine the level of forgiveness and then tells the SBA that they ask the SBA to fund the amount of forgiveness to the bank so that they get the money back that they gave you or gave the eligible party originally. And then the loan amount is just whatever is left over, what the SBA didn't pay back. So it's a very attractive program that should help a lot of ventures through the difficult time. Obviously, any venture that has dealt with on-premise activities in states that have been shut down would be negatively impacted. And so if it's bars, restaurants, or any alcoholic beverage company selling to these outlets, we would recommend strongly to everybody to take a close look at this legislation, work with your accountants and bankers to see how eligible you are and how you can make this work in order to secure a business continuity over the next couple of weeks, which hopefully won't be as shocking as the last couple of weeks. So stay safe, everybody, and good luck. Thank you.